Hey everybody, it's the Trout. Here's a quick question for you. What do Bob Seger, Paul Simon, Wilson Pickett, Etta James, the Rolling Stones, and a myriad of other famous musicians have in common? Well, other than the fact that they sold millions of records, they all recorded their music in one little Alabama town called Muscle Shoals. There's been more famous musicians that come through that town and Grammy Award winners than you can, well, as they say, shake a stick at. And my interview today is with a guy that knows everything about muscle shows, Johnny Belew. Johnny is well connected and he knows a lot of people there, but more importantly, he runs a touring organization called Rhythm and Blues. So if you ever want to go to muscle shows and see where, well, Aretha Franklin did RESPCET, or Etta James sang I'd Rather Go Blind, or maybe you've heard of a song called Wild Horses by Mick and that guy named Keith. Well, Johnny can show you where it is. And he tells us that and so much other things that are so cool about Muscle Shoals, Alabama. And you know what that is? That's next on KT and the Trout.
KT and the Trout Show!
Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Nestled along what the Indians called the Singing River, the Tennessee River, and the swamps nearby. Some people call it the hit recording capital of the world. And for good reason. The father of the blues, W.C. Handy, was born there. But there are two iconic recording studios that have produced more hits than, well, let's just say, name Grammy comes up a lot when you record at Muscle Shoals, Alabama. The Rolling Stones, Paul Simon, Aretha Franklin, Steve Winwood, and a myriad of other great artists have recorded and become famous at the Muscle Shoals, Alabama recording studios. For music lovers, there's no better place than to be than Muscle Shoals, Alabama. And while you're in Muscle Shoals, you need to have the best tour guide available. And that's Rhythm and Blues with Johnny Belew. Johnny Belew's history of the area is unsurpassed. He'll take you to places that you only dream about. See where Aretha Franklin recorded her famous song. See where the Rolling Stones recorded some of the greatest hits they ever had. With Rhythm and Blues tours, Johnny will take you back in time and you will enjoy every musical memory of it. You dream of musical history, we show it to you at Rhythm and Blues Tours with Johnny Belew. Call 256-810-8834 for complete details. That's Johnny Belew at Rhythm and Blues Tours, 256-810-8834. Or check out our Facebook page at Rhythm and Blues, that's BELEWS, and relive the musical history of America with Rhythm and Blues tours. What is your main thing? And I know that you work on a lot of different things, but you have Johnny Belew Tour. What's it actually called? What's your tour company called? It's not
Rhythm and Blues Tours.
That's such a cool name.
Thank you.
Rhythm and Blues. It's not blues like you're saying blues. It's BELEWS.
Blues. Yes.
Blues.
That's taken from Jay Wexler, who coined the term rhythm and blues.
And would you like to tell the people who Jay Wexler is?
Father of rock and roll.
There you go. And what
rhythm and blues? Yeah.
What little song would he know that people know that he did?
Possibly RESPCT.
Oh, that's kind of an important song. That's Aretha Franklin. Okay, so Johnny lives in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Actually, he's 2 blocks. You just got to tell me from Fame Studios, which stands for what? Were you the one that told me?
Florence, Alabama Musical Enterprise.
There you go, Florence, Alabama. So if you get a map out and look at Alabama, there's Florence, there's Muscle Shoals, and what's the other? Isn't there another town?
Sheffield and Tuscumbia.
They're all close together.
Tuscumbia is where the Helen Keller home is. That's where she was
born.
Oh,
that's right, Helen Keller. Boy, I remember learning about her in school. They don't talk about her anymore. And The thing about, if you're listening to this and you're probably saying, why do I have somebody from Muscle Shoals, Alabama? Because what's the population of Muscle Shoals?
We're probably about 14,000 right now, just in Muscle Shoals proper.
So you're saying, why am I talking to a guy in a town in Alabama called Muscle Shoals? Well, for those that are watching this and are musicians, if you have done any history, some of the biggest hits in musical history have been recorded at two studios there. One, Fame, which he is 2 blocks from, and the other one at Muscle Shoals. What is it called? Muscle Shoals? I've seen it
Muscle
before.
Shoals Sound,
Sound.
3614 Jackson Highway.
That's, yeah, 36. It's the big number on the building itself. So, just so you understand, some of the great people that have been through Fame are some little British band called the Rolling Stones, Paul Simon, Aretha Franklin. What was the other one you were telling me about?
The Stones were at 3614. Aretha
They were 30.
Franklin
Well,
was
but one
at
of the
Fame.
two. Yeah, so
Yeah,
they're one of the
exactly.
two. And that little song called "Gimme Shelter" was recorded at Muscle Shoals with the lady that unfortunately Mary Clayton passed away not too long ago, that did the high vocals on it. Anyway, Johnny is the expert because he knows everybody in the music industry down there because he's been around long. I mean, look at his beard. Come on. So
It's not gray, it's wisdom.
it's there you go. Just kind of like, this is not really white. This is I
Exactly.
dyed them. People ask me who does your hair, and I go, God. So- and people
Exactly.
go, I like your hair color, but I said, as long as I have it, I don't care what color it is. So, so
True.
Johnny knows a lot of people in the industry. He's got things he can tell us about. But one of the things I want to have him talk about is rhythm and blues tour. Because one of these days I'm going to be going to Muscle Shoals, and I'm hoping I'm going to be in one of those studios to record. But even if I don't, the history there is phenomenal. So, Johnny, talk a little bit about your musical background and a little bit about the whole thing, how you got started on this rhythm and blues tours.
Well, for a long time, I've uh, tried to tell people about where I live and what's going on here, and show them around when they would come to town and everything, and just showcase what's been done here. I had breakfast this morning with Travis Womack, who's a legendary guitar player that he moved here from Memphis, but he's called the Shoals home forever and everything. And he played on like Baby Don't Get Hooked on Me and Patches and a lot of those great songs, Clarence Carter, that they did at Fame. But he had a career in Memphis. He had a huge record when he was 15 years old called Scratchy, that all the British guys were trying to figure out how he's doing that. So I met him and people like Donnie Fritz, who's now passed on, but I met those guys and they got to be really good friends. And I realized that when you hear about Muscle Shoals, you hear about a lot of people, but you don't hear about some of the people that were just a big a part as the others were. So started trying to tell people about it and promote it. And some people would come to town and say, well, show me around. What do you do? And you got to take them to a studio. You got to take them to get a barbecue sandwich for lunch. And so after COVID or during COVID, I was talking with some people and I said, I've been doing this for a long, long time and maybe I need to turn it into a business. And I was at my friend's studio out at Wishbone and we were talking and we kind of looked at each other and he said, I've got it. And I said, what's that? And he said, Rhythm and Blues Tours, taken from the Jerry Wexler phrase, rhythm and blues. My name is spelled Belew. So that's how it's kind of it's all coming together and everything. My catchphrase is the circle gets bigger. And so
Right.
That's kind of what we're doing. We're sharing the circle with the world.
Well, and I think the other thing too is, and this is you and I, when I was talking to Johnny originally, from a good friend of mine that hooked me up, mentioned the fact that he had been catering, and you do catering too, don't you? Or you're
I
doing that?
do. I was fortunate enough that last week we had the Blind Boys of Alabama were in town at the Nut House studio over in Sheffield. Jimmy Nuts, he's a great engineer, studio owner, Grammy winner there in Sheffield. And the Blind Boys, I think this is probably the second time that they've cut there. And Jimmy Carter, who is the oldest member of the Blind Boys, 90 years old, is a big fan of a soup that I make. And anytime they're coming to town, they call and say, hey, can you cook for us? And it's always a great honor. And when a 90-year-old man says, what's for supper, you say, whatever you want. And what time do I need to be there?
And they were up for a Grammy. I don't know if they won. I don't think they
They
did.
they they did not win this year, but they have won in the past and everything. But
And that was
what I
with
heard,
Bela Fleck. If those people that know Bela Fleck, they did an album with Bela Fleck. They played with Peter Gabriel, of all people. They played with a lot of famous people. And
absolutely, and from what I heard last week, when 2023 comes around, they'll probably be up in the Grammy nominations again. They record for actually for a local label here in Florence called Single Lock Records, which one of the owners is John Paul White, formerly of the Civil Wars.
you were mentioning him before, yeah. Well, and it's fun. Do you get to, I assume, but from what you just got through saying, you got to hear them when they were recording? Were
Yeah,
you,
I sit in on some of the session and everything, and absolutely fabulous. I think they're going to have some special guests. I'm not for sure who all that will be, but the rhythm section was quite great. Great. One of the drummer was actually Chad Gamble from Jason Isbell's 400 unit.
there's so much talent out there that never gets discovered.
Oh,
And
amen.
and and sometimes that's okay, but the point that I think you mentioned earlier, and you mentioned this to me before, was when people like the Blind Boys go in, they're vocalists. They're not players. They don't play any instruments. So they got to bring in some pretty darn good
It,
studio musicians. And most of the time, especially now, when I was a kid, I bought an album. I would study that album, every little bit on it, where it was recorded at, who was the engineer, who played this, who wrote that. Well, now you don't have that anymore. So a lot of
that's
these people, I mean, that's why I can tell you who Jeff Emmerich was with the recording engineer for the Beatles. I can tell, there's a lot of things I know about that music because of that, and all the people you mentioned, I grew up listening to them. But it's
that's
really
the
the
reason
people.
we miss. That's the reason we miss albums today. I miss the liner
Yeah, I mean, you
notes.
don't get to sing anything. I mean, you bring a
Exactly.
song out, it goes on streaming, and all the details are lost. And I think I may have told you this. I finished a song I'm getting put out my next album, which is by a Grammy Award nominated harmonica player. Well, I'd like people to know that because I tell them. I mean, not because I mean he did it for free for me. He was a nice guy to do it. Nobody cares. I mean, they might say, "Who's playing?" I didn't know you played harmonica. Well, no, the guys, and then I think that's the sad thing about it is, like you said, you've mentioned to me before, is the fact that all these people that come in, they're really kind of unsung heroes in the background. And you
Oh
talk
yeah.
about, I mean, we can talk about two famous groups, the Wrecking Crew, which was big in the 60s. So many famous people were on the Wrecking Crew. They did they did so many hits that we all thought that they were playing, these people were playing the music. They weren't. And the other one, which is right there, is the Muscle Shoal guys, the Swampers. And I think you said there's one Swamper left.
Da- David Hood he's still alive and kicking.
And
Correct.
all these people that played, nobody really knows who they are. And they're the ones that came up with a lot of the licks and stuff like that for these musicians. And it's kind of the way it is. And I think sometimes I was talking to a friend of mine in the UK. In fact, I just got an email from her. I said, I'd really like to sometimes talk to the people that back up the band because they're the ones that do all the work. And not to say the main people don't do the work, but when you got a guitar tech, you got somebody setting up all your equipment, all you do is you go out and everything's set up, you're
Plug
ready
in
to
and
rock and
play.
roll, plug and play.
Yeah.
Somebody had to do all that work. And sometimes I'd like to know what's it like for them. And these tours, the big tours, well, it used to be, you don't see it anymore. People like, the ones that are been in the 60s and 70s, and well, now, I mean, I saw Pink Floyd and there was like 20 semis that showed up. Who are all these people? You don't even know who they are. They get paid. And sometimes I think they may like that because it's like I work on fill in the blank, and it's got to be rewarding to them to the extent that, yeah, they got paid the studio rate or whatever. But you mentioned a couple, like, Patches. You mentioned a couple of songs a while ago. Every time he hears that, he's probably going, "That was me," but nobody knows it.
Yeah, that's what's really sad, that we're in a diner in Sheffield this morning, and you know a lot of people knew who Travis was, but the majority didn't. I've got some friends that just moved here from the West Coast, and I was introducing them, and they were like, "Holy crap, that's Travis Womack!" But a lot of people when they're
Yeah,
walking down the street don't
no.
know that. But Travis spent a number of years touring with Little Richard, and we were talking today about, when they were over in Europe, those cats were they wanted to see Little Richard, but they wanted to see Travis Womack because they wanted to hear that funky guitar sound that he had developed and
Right.
everything.
Well, if you study any of the old 50s music and the famous guys that came up through that, the British players, most all of them that they listened to were the people from America.
Well, right down the road at Fame, the first two songs that Arthur Alexander recorded were covered by the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. You
And
Better
that,
Move On and Anna.
oh, Anna, I had that album with that on, and somebody I think stole it when I was in college because I lost. Well, I don't have any. I have albums, but not anymore. And they did covers of like "Roll Over Beethoven," which is Chuck Berry's song. They did covers. People don't think people like that did covers. Oh, yes, they did.
Oh yeah, they did. They didn't write everything, but
Well,
it just
and
shows how much they loved American music and especially what they were doing here in Muscle Shoals.
and I think somebody like you that's lives there and lives and breathes it every day. Of course, I mean, when you run into famous people, you just talk to them. Hey, how you doing? I
Yeah.
mean, how's it going? Hey, Johnny, I need some soup. You're like,
it's always
okay.
it's a- it's always a pleasure when they call. But yeah, Rick, we're tonight. There's a band that played. You mentioned earlier, I think Mike Curtis, who was your guest before, who
Right.
is a dear friend of mine. He and I actually went to high school together, and then we both migrated 100 miles south and ended up living in the same town. But he gave one of the slides you were talking about to Will McFarland, and Will has a band that plays on every Tuesday night in Florence called Fathers and Sons, and you couldn't find any better. I mean,
No.
they're absolutely fabulous. At any given time here in the shows, there's so much music, and like you
Oh,
said,
yeah.
many times it's not the household names, but it's the people that form the music that we know today, and that's what I appreciate.
Well, and there's so many great players there. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
and I think that Mike Curtis and I were talking about when he did Live, and he said, well, I just call up the guys and go to the studio because they're that good.
Yeah,
And I wanted to ask you real quick because you mentioned it. Chapel Hart,
yep,
do you know those ladies?
I do. They're dear friends. They
Oh man, I didn't hear about them, and then I listened to their music, and I went, "Oh, that's cool stuff there, dude."
Yeah,
I mean, and I know they're on tour now. They were in New Orleans last night, and
yeah.
they're playing with Indigo Girls. I know for a
They
while.
they are. That's home base. They've actually sit on the couch that I'm sitting on right now. They're
But you know what's
yeah,
great
they're
about them, and I don't want to get too much in this because we're going to go back to your tour thing, but it's kind of like what's going on in American Idol right now. There's one black country western singer. It's just one of those things you just don't see. I mean, I'm not trying to pigeonhole people, but Chapel Hart, they come out and first you see them and you're like, I had no idea what they're going to sound like. And then the gal that sings lead, she started singing, and then they blended it with their harmonies, and I
that
went, oh,
Dan- Danica's fabulous. That's her sister Devin singing with her, and then Tree is their cousin. I hope she's I hope she listens to this because she's the mean one out of the bunch. I can say
well, you can tell them this is the part you need to listen to.
that.
But you know what it looks
But
like to me is the one thing that I loved about them, and I think this is what you see when you're going there and you're seeing these people, they're having a good time. This is about, and I can tell you, I've had this conversation with a lot of people. It's not about anymore. And I forgot who the lady was on American Idol the night. She was on American Idol. Now she's a top country. Got 5 gold. I mean, she's got a lot of big music out, but it's people don't do it. You can't do it for money anymore. I mean, there's no money in it. It used to be I'd want to be a recording artist so I could sell my records. There isn't that. There's not that anymore. It's on the touring. But the more important thing now is the more people that I talk to and visit with, and players like you mentioned, not the studio people, they're having a great time.
oh
And
yeah,
I'm a musician. I've been a musician for over 50 years. I just love to play. And when you got some people that you're playing with that you just kind of get in a groove with them, There ain't nothing better than that. And
That's
whether there's 50 people or 3 people listening to it, you don't care.
exactly. Let me tell you this quickly. The reason I met Chapel Hart, because it's something's coming up real soon. In 2016, for the first time, I met a guy named Johnny Boswell from the Kosciuszko, Mississippi area. He's got 3 radio stations down there, and we kind of met. And he came here and did a tour, and that's how we met. And now here, 6 years later, this will be the 5th anniversary. They developed a thing called the Mississippi Songwriter of the Year contest, and the finals. He'll come up here in about a week or so and bring all the entries, and we'll go out to Wishbone and listen to them, and we'll narrow that down to 15. And then June the
Oh, wow.
25th, I think
That's
it is,
cool.
we'll be down in Meridian, Mississippi, and they'll pick the winner. So that's how I got to know Chapel Hart. So as I say, the circle gets bigger because every day there's somebody coming to Muscle Shoals. And
Well,
that's
and do they do originals? Or they
yeah, they submit original songs, and that's
okay.
how the song that Chapel Hart just did the video for, called "Made for Me." That's the first song I ever heard them do, and I was just totally blown away. I was like, "There's something special about those girls." And so now they come up, and we go eat fried chicken, and we go perform at church, and yeah, we've had lots of fun here.
So all right. So I call you up and say I want to go on a tour. What do I get? Where am I going? Is it custom made, or do you have a standard tour that you 2 people on, or what's
You
it
know,
like?
it it's somewhat standard, but I mean, it depends on what you like. I mean, everybody, if they're coming to Muscle Shoals, they want to be baptized in Muscle Shoals, but some people might like some things other more than others. And so obviously we'll go to Fame Studio, and we'll go to Muscle Shoals Sound Studio, and then there's lots of other options. I keep mentioning my friend Billy Lawson out at Wishbone. He's written several #1 songs,
But
and
you
he's
said
just
that's in Sheffield. Is that in Sheffield?
actually, it's in Muscle Shoals. It's right
Oh,
across
okay.
from the Muscle Shoals Airport.
Yeah,
Hank
there you
Williams
go.
Jr. cut Family Tradition there, and Roy
Ah,
Orbison cut his last album there. John Prine recorded there. Just
well, I have that last album of Roy Orbison too.
yeah, Clayton Ivey and Terry Woodford built it as a production studio, and then ended up starting using it to record events. But we the thing about Muscle Shoals is, when you're going from one place to another, you never know who you're going to run into, because we're such a musically talented area. So when you go into the local diner, you may see one of these guys, and you get to have lunch, and it's just someone said to me recently, said, "Well, we can just go to the studios. Anybody can do that." And I said, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
But you can't get the backstories.
No.
That's what I can offer is the backstories, and just the easiness of getting around and be able to go into these studios and um,
So
try to
tell
show.
it. What's a typical backstory? What's the one that you usually just kind of the one that everybody goes, "Oh, really?" I mean,
Well, I mean, it depends on who, who who it is and what day and everything. But you just the one of the cool things, just recently they had a tribute to Roger Hawkins last week in town, who was the drummer for the Swampers, the Muscle Shoals rhythm section
right?
at
Yeah.
3614 and everything. And he was on iconic records. I mean, he was on Respect. He was on Mustang Sally. He was on uh, Old Time Rock and Roll, which is the most recorded song, radio play song ever, is what I understand. And a great backstory about that song was they were recording Seeger. They were going to cut, I think, like 3 sides. And anyway, Seeger's people didn't have enough money to do the whole session. So the guys made a deal, said, "Look, if you'll give us a part of it, we'll do the 3 days and everything." So anyway, one of the songs they cut was
That
Old
was a
Time Rock
smart
and Roll.
financial move on their part.
Yes, yes. So when they're recording Old Time Rock and Roll, they're standing out on the back stoop listening to the playback or taking a smoke or whatever they're doing, and a
Yeah.
car pulled up with a young kid from actually, I think they lived in Texas at the time. Mom and dad were on vacation. Kid was like 16 years old, and he asked Jimmy Johnson, said, "What do you have to do to play on a record?" And said, Jimmy normally said I would have told him something else, but that day I said,
I know
"Is that a
exactly what he
guitar?" And
would
he
have
said,
said.
"Yeah." Years later, the young man went in saying, "Hey, I played on this record. I need to receive some royalties from it." His name is Howie McDonald. That is him on that record. It
Wow.
was his mom and dad sat in the car with the car running. He played on the record, got back in the car, left. Sometime moved back to Muscle Shoals and never played on another record, but lives over in Atlanta now, has a great career as a blues artist. But yeah, I mean, that's what happened.
So he was playing on old time rock and roll.
That's him on Old Time Rock and Roll. That's
And you know what's
exactly
really
right.
funny about that song? Because back when that was out, and everybody was going to parties, and everybody was DJs were playing that over and over again. And so one time I looked to see, did Bob Seger write that? And I went, no.
It's George Jackson.
And I
He's,
thought,
he,
this guy's playing a song that's iconic, and he didn't write it. It's kind of like I wrote the song. What was it? What's his face? It's I write the songs that everybody's.
Barry
He didn't
Manilow.
write. Yeah, he never wrote the song. It's
Well,
kind of like,
I'll tell you a little more trivia about that. The track is actually the demo track. They cannot. They used the demo that a guy named Dennis Gully put the vocals on, but Randy McCormick came up with that lick at the start of it, the piano and everything. But they
now, what song you're talking about?
talking about Old Time Rock and Roll.
Oh, old time. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's the demo. They just put Seeger's voice on the demo.
So his band had to learn it, which is not a hard
Yeah,
song, but
yeah,
still, you
exactly.
know. And he's one of those iconic people too. It's like, what happened to him? I mean, obviously, I think he just got tired of touring. I mean, I don't
He
know.
did, but I understand that when he does tour, he gets a premium price, so he doesn't have to do it very much.
Couple of gigs and it's over.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
and I know you mentioned to me before when we were talking on the phone that a lot of these studios have instruments that were used on these famous songs. They're still in the
Ab-
studio.
Absolutely. At Fame right now, they actually have started a another thing. It's called like a backstage pass, and you can go up and go to actually see Rick Hall's office, and you see the instruments that were used on the Aretha section that that actually happened here. When Aretha came to Muscle Shoals, that's when, even though it was a 1 day session and they finished in New York, that's what started her career as we know it.
Well, that song can that's it's interesting about music is you never know. As a songwriter myself, it's always amazing to me, and it's not really amazing, it's funny. You write songs and the different people feel about different songs. And of course, back when Aretha did Respect, that was when all, and I'm not saying this has happened, but all the payola was going on too. People just used to pay, for those people that didn't know, they used to pay radio stations to play their
Yeah,
songs, and they quit doing it because they made a law against doing it. Now they call it marketing. They
yeah.
just,
One of the stories you'll see in the little video that you see before you take the tour of Fame was about Rick Hall and Dan Penn going across the South in a station wagon with several cases of vodka. And every time they would go to a black radio station, they would leave them a record and a bottle of vodka. Well, when they got back home on Monday, they had a hit record. So call it payola, call it marketing, call it smart.
well, I remember years ago somebody on a very well-known radio broadcaster said, "Do you think Wooly Bully would have got played?" if it- or and you're thinking back, yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? But now it's completely different. And that was for those people that know. There was a program manager at every radio station. Sometimes the small stations, it was the guy that owned it was the program manager.
Yeah,
And then as the stations got bigger and bigger, they'd have program managers, and you try to give it. Now everything's digital. It's probably programmed someplace else, and they send it out, and it's like, here's the section you're going to play, and they put the ads, local ads in, and all that stuff. So it's lost that personal touch back. I
it.
think that's part of it.
But we're pretty lucky here. There again, I was at a local radio station here week before last, which is owned by Jerry Phillips, who is Sam Phillips' son. Sam Phillips discovered Elvis Presley,
Yep.
started Sun Records. He's from
Yep.
he's from Florence, Alabama as well. His granddaughter runs the station now, Hallie. She does a fabulous job. And Barry Billings, I mentioned earlier, he was working with a young man from California, and they were able to go into the studio, perform live that morning. You can't do that on most radio stations
No.
now. You
No.
you just can't walk in there and do something like that. But we're really lucky that we still have people who care about the music here and are willing to do that.
Well, and
we all remember, well, some of us do, younger people won't, but if a tour came through, the PR people to have them go to the studio.
It-
It didn't matter, and they'd go in, and of course, to be an after. Well, sometimes they do it in the morning when you go for the drive time, but they try to do it drive time. And you're right. Some of them would bring their guitars in, acoustics, and start singing, and that doesn't exist anymore because it was kind of cool. You'd hear famous people come through your town and go, "Hey, so and so's in the studio," and you're like tuned in to listen to it before you went to the concert that night.
So when Elvis Presley came here in the late 50s, early 60s, there was a station called WJOI in Florence, and I know the grandson is a pretty good friend of mine and everything. His father was a DJ there. He actually recorded Elvis Presley to vinyl in the studio at that time. They
Oh
used that
wow.
to cut their uh, commercials at the time. And so I've got Tommy to tell me great stories about that. I mean,
Oh,
it's
I can
just,
imagine.
yeah, back when you could do those things.
Yeah, now it's all and it's you're talking about Roy Orbison. I remember that album he did in the '80s, which Bono wrote one of the songs on there, "Mystery Girl." But and I had it on CD back when people got CDs. It was analog because you could hear the tape of the hiss of the tape before he came on. You could hear
Yeah,
just for a split second. I went, "Oh, this is analog," because you could hear it. That doesn't exist anymore. But what I think is interesting about your area, and there are certain areas about the world that are famous for things. Muscle Shoals is just apparently, New Orleans has got New Orleans jazz and has a vibe to it. Chicago blues, all these things. But Muscle Shoals just has this vibe, and it's not, for a long time. Well, I know it wasn't people, I used to think only CW people, country and western people. Of course, I don't know what they call it anymore because there's no country and western per se.
yeah.
But it's but it's there's so many people that have come through that, and even now people show up to record because I just think I mean, I was at Abbey Road once years ago. I was at Abbey Road, and I stood outside. My wife says, "Why are you standing outside?" I said, "Because I feel like I'm not worthy. I can't go inside." And she goes,
It's
"Go inside and look." So I go inside and got a rate sheet because I was with the band back there. And I thought, well, that's not so bad. Of course, I have to bring everybody over from the States to play. But there, and of course, if you're a Beatles fan and all the other, there's a lot of people. But the thing about it is, I know maybe some people want to go there just because it's got a vibe to it, and and
exactly.
and maybe I wonder. It's kind of like playing with. I used to play a lot of golf. In fact, I live on a golf course, and I'm not a great golfer, but I'm okay. But I'd always play with better players because it always made me play better. Same with, I think, with musicians. You kind of want people that are a little bit better, or at least you're really good, that good, because you get better. And when you're in some place like that area, Muscle Shoals, all the people are good. It's kind of
Yeah,
like Nashville. It's like Music Row in Nashville. I mean, there's not anybody that sucks. I mean, there probably
there's
are, but they're probably not, they're hard to find.
there's not a lot of slackers around here, that's for
No.
sure.
And that's what's funny about it when you think about it, because it's not LA, it's not New York, it's not Chicago, it's not a big city, but it has a vibe to it. And if you go there, if I ever get a chance to record, you just kind of have to put your A game up all the time because it's like embarrassing if you go in and go, well, someone like you said, if something like Old Time Rock and Roll or Respect was recorded here or Give Me Shelter was recorded there, you're kind of like, I got a big target to hit to hit as a musician. But you must, I mean, Johnny, I know you're one of these guys that people like and know, but you must really like what you do. I mean, I can tell from talking to you, we haven't talked a lot, but you love what you do. I mean, I can just tell.
I do. I'm pretty fortunate that I say this all the time when I'm talking with tourism and tourist people and everything. If I went into an office every day, it might be different. I might not enjoy it as much, but I love talking about where I live. I love talking about the people that live here because they've kind of formed the soundtrack of my life and everything. And
Well,
there's so many people that there's a lot of people that get talked about, and then there's a lot of people that don't get talked about. So it's
yeah,
kind of become my legacy to keep those people's legacy alive. And
yeah.
anything I can do to promote that and bring people here, it's a beautiful thing.
And you know what? It's all about community. And
Exactly.
it was actually our person that we know that told me about you. He actually mentioned that you, whenever time I talked about everybody I'm talking to in the music industry all over the world, he said, your circle always gets bigger. Gee, I wonder where he heard that from. And he mentioned
Well,
your name. So, but I never thought about it that way. And to me, I would think it'd be kind of really cool in your position. I mean, obviously you're not looking for talent, but if you go into the studio or you see somebody that's new and you just go, they're going to be, you know it as soon as you hear them, you're going, okay, we're going to hear more from this person.
yeah,
And
and
see their career start and go, like this, that's got to be cool too.
it's very cool. We've got some young bands in the area that are carrying on this tradition that I know are going to become household names one day. So that's really exciting. But the main thing is it's just there really is a good community about everybody wanting to help everybody here. I mean, we're divided by the river, and sometimes even though it's a few hundred feet across, it might as well be miles and everything. But
I know that feeling. I
you,
used to live in
you,
Kansas City. They had this thing
yeah,
called the Missouri River. Yeah,
yeah,
so yeah.
the feeling and
Yes, I
everything.
do.
But when they hit a down note, everybody's gelling together and everybody's trying to help, which is a beautiful thing.
It is. It's all about, and it's all about community. I said that earlier, but the thing about it, and I had this conversation with somebody the other day. If you're a musician or involved in the industry, you're part of the group. You're in the club.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't care if you're a producer, an engineer, a roadie, whatever. You're part of the club, and it's a great club to be in. It doesn't matter. I mean, I like talking to people even of different genres just because it's kind of cool because we all know what we're talking about. And I think you and I may have mentioned this, but when I was talking to the musician over an engineer, he's actually a trained engineer. He music is music. And even though it may sound different, everybody kind of has the same groove about it. They love doing it and they want to continue to do it. And it's just, and I kind of, in a way, feel sorry for people that don't get that. I mean, they love music, but as a musician and being blessed with to be able to play guitar and be a songwriter, I just feel great about it. And I'm thankful for that every chance I get. And I've said this to people before when I play and somebody comes up to me and says, wow, that was really good. I just go, I'm just kind of I'm that guy. I got lucky here. Somebody gave me this. It came from above. I had to make it better. But, and I think the other thing about it is, and it's true, because people ask me, where's your Texas accent? I go, well, I only use it when I need it. You know what I'm saying? But part of it is that community is not just about musicians, it's about the community in general, your local community. And I'm sure it has the
exactly.
same vibe no matter what. But that's the Southern thing. And people that are not from the South, they kind of make fun of us. I mean, people have the Southern accents and all that stuff. It's just different. And I remember, and when you do these tours, and well, by the way, I'm going to put this. We'll put this on the website. But what's your website? Or you
Actually,
actually your Facebook page. You
uh,
have a.
ry- Facebook, yeah, it's Rhythm and Blues Tours.
Okay. All right. So we're going to make sure that gets up there. That's the Facebook if you want to get hold of Johnny, because I'm going to tell you right now, I haven't been there. I'm going to make a trip over there. I just got to figure out how I'm going to do it. Well, I know how I'm going to get it there. I just have to tell my wife. She goes, I'm going to go. I want to go to Muscle Shoals, and she'll say, okay, have a good time. Um, I think that it's one of those places that if you're a musician, and I've been a rock and blues guy for years, it's kind of iconic to go. That whole vibe down there is cool. And you're blessed, brother. I mean, and the fact that you're at that position in life. And this is what I tell people. My last band I was in, they were all close to my age. And I said, one of them was in his 50s, and I said, you know what's going to happen to you? I said, now that you're getting older, people actually ask you questions because they respect because of your age. And they're like, what? He goes, what do you mean? I said, used to be they didn't want your opinion because you were younger. But now I said, the snow on the roof thing. But that's the thing. A lot of these people you mentioned, and the sad thing for me is that's why it's important to see new people come on. Is so many musicians, like you mentioned earlier, they're older now. They're getting older and older and older, and they won't be with us forever. I mean, imagine a gentleman playing 90 years old still singing for Blind Boys. I mean,
I
he doesn't need. I mean, why does he do it? Because he loves
because he
playing.
loves it, because it's his mission. And the same day, I took my 90-year-old friend Willie Ruff, who is from Sheffield, Alabama, traveled all over the world and has moved back here now. But Willie's the only man I know that actually shook the hand of W.C. Handy, and so it was
Wow.
a beautiful thing when Willie Ruff and Jimmy Carter got to talk that day and everything. As I say, the circle gets bigger. Obviously, it did that day.
Well, and just
And
listening to him, I can imagine what that's like. You know.
the Sunday before that, Willie met Spooner Oldham. First time he'd ever met him. Spooner's 78. Here's Willie's 90. They both have played on literally thousands of records. They both lived in LA at the same time. They both were instrumental in Aretha Franklin's career, but had never met until Sunday 2 weeks ago. So
Isn't
it's a
that
beautiful
amazing?
thing.
It's a beautiful
Yes.
thing. Hey, before we go, you mentioned this guy that owns a small label or he owns a recording studio. Excuse me, turn my phone off here. You say or you said where the Blind Boys were recording.
Oh, they were in Sheffield at the Nut House. And then John Paul White, who owns the label, has a place called Sundrop Sound in Florence. Formerly, he was with the Civil Wars. And then my buddy Billy Lawson is out at Wishbone Studios, where I was staying at the Roy Orbison, cut his last album.
Brother, I thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rick.
And
I truly appreciate your time.
KT and the Trout Show!